Hello, networkers, and welcome back to another episode of Ask the Network Engineer, where I will answer one of your questions. And this question comes from HD Flight Sim, and it's a great long one, so you can definitely check it out and read it. But one of his questions in this particular comment is, you mentioned that Cisco has a political environment. Can we know more about that? So I used to work at Cisco back in 1998. And I talked about the politics and kind of the working environments at Cisco. So I want to talk more about that neutrally in this video. Okay, so the one thing that I'm not going to do is I'm not going to make this as a controversial, conspiracy, hated, negative video about Cisco. I believe in helping people and giving people information to consider and to use to become a network engineer or an IT professional. Because the bottom line is, I enjoyed my experience at Cisco. I am here today as a network engineer because my networking experience began at Cisco. It was a learning experience. There's things that I liked about Cisco, but there were a lot of things that I did not like. But those were components that made me understand how things work in a company that is focused on all Cisco, or maybe it's all Juniper or all Microsoft. It was a good learning experience for that. But also, being at Cisco gave me a perspective of how I need to be a network engineer on the outside. So let's go ahead and talk about all of that. But first, let me talk about how I got started in all of this. Okay, so I was hired into Cisco a few weeks before I graduated from college. And it came from a contracting agency. So I talked about that in a previous episode of going to a contracting type company and saying to them that you want to be a network engineer and getting jobs that will align with that. So, but this contracting agency contacted me because Cisco was booming. They had a lot of opportunities and they need them to be filled if I was interested into that. Of course. So I went ahead and applied for the job, thinking I would not get the job. It was a 3-day interview process with different levels of people. And they loved me, I guess. And I was hired into Cisco. It was great. And I remember going to Cisco for the very first time, for the very first interview, and looking at their campus. It's at the San Jose campus, or not San Jose, but in the San Jose area. It's been a long time since I've been there. But it was a huge campus with many beautiful buildings. Everything inside was it looked very fancy, I guess, from my first experience from that. And when I was hired into Cisco, it was like, okay, this is my first opportunity for being a network engineer. And the people there were fantastic. I had a manager, but I also had 2 supervisors as well. And there were other people on the phone doing technical support. And I tell people this, that my very, very first mentor, the person who I looked up to, that was like really inspired by, was a guy named George. I won't give you his last name because I want to protect his privacy. He probably don't want me to say his name right now. But he was such a great guy. He was very humble. He was very honest. He knew what he knew. He knew what he did not know. The customers loved him. He had a very calm personality. And I learned from him about that personality, about being humble. You do not know everything. You know what you know what you do not know. And that's a learning thing. That's a great thing. I learned all of that from George. And that was like a very great positive thing that I got from Cisco starting out. It was also great because Cisco actually had classes they would teach us when we were not on the phones doing technical support. And George was the one teaching us. And he started teaching us about IP subnetting, which is very, very important. And the way that he taught it was very, very clear, very structured. And it is something that I remember to this very day of how to do subnetting. George was a very, very great teacher. But that's all he taught. Week after week after week was IP subnetting. And for me, I got it. It's fantastic. The way you taught it is great, George. I learned it within a week or two. Let's go on to some other topics. configuring routers and switches, interfaces, routing, all that cool stuff, especially since it will help us with our job. But it never happened. It was very, very slow. He only taught IP subnetting. So I said, okay, fine, I'll get what I can get, but let me take matters in my own hands. And that was when, as I mentioned before, I started doing Cisco networking on my own. I started learning this stuff with the equipment I had access to, with some of the information that I had access to. I was learning all this on my own. Furthermore, my very, very, very first Cisco book ever, and I still keep it today because it's a good memory, is this book right here. Cisco TCP/IP Routing Professional Reference. It's not a Cisco Press book, it's a different book. But this book was fantastic. I see I have a lot of different tabs of learning about router setup, static routing, IGRP. That's something that doesn't exist anymore, by the way. There is RIP routing. OSPF is in here. Redistribution is in here. Configuring bridging, NetBIOS over IPX. I'm not that old, but that was the networking technologies back then. There was stun. Wow, this is old stuff. ISDN X.25, ISDN PRI. I mastered this book. This is a great book. I keep it for memories. And learning about all this stuff on my own, having access to the equipment and configuring that. And I was also so excited about certifications. I remember I was given this, right? A nice little brochure talking about the different certifications, tracks and things like that, right? You know, CCNA, CCNP, CCIE routing and switching. This was it back in the day, right? This is what we were given. And it was just like, wow, this is really exciting here. Building these networks here, it's like a kid in a candy store. So all those things made me very, very excited. And that's what I did pretty much on my own time to actually learn more about Cisco networking, because the classes that they were teaching were going a little bit too slow for me though. So again, I kind of did my own thing. And what was great about the learning I was doing on my own time, that I was closing tickets very fast on the phone. Configuration, support, even some design work I was doing on the phone because I was excited for all this Cisco stuff. And when you close out a ticket, a survey goes to the client and they can fill it out, with a 1 being that it was bad service or 5 being great. And I received a lot of great surveys, which I saved over the years for a high score for closing out and providing the professional assistance to the clients that were calling in. So like, for example, here's a survey for when I configured IPX routing for a client. And she says, I really mean the 5s above. My solution was provided very quickly and accurately with no hassle. So that was really nice. Here's another one for configuring X.25 for a client for a remote site. And this one, the customer said, I was a first-time caller to Cisco. I heard from other techs that calling Cisco was as easy and all the techs were very helpful. I was glad that reaching someone with router experience was as easy as calling your mother. Thanks, Michael, for all of your help. And it's another one for configuring frame relay. And this one is with licensing assistance. Here's a password recovery. Here's one for configuring Apple Talk. That's old. Another one for configuring a Cisco Catalyst 4500 series layer 3 switch, VLANs and trunking. Another one for assistance for configuring a T1. Another one for doing a software upgrade, an iOS upgrade. One doing a, what is this here? Yes, one doing a iOS recovery. They lost the iOS. I don't know this client though, but looking at the descriptions here, there are some clients that the iOS image was missing. So we had to do a very tricky way of using a console cable and pushing the iOS image to the actual flash and then actually starting it up though. It's a very difficult, or it's a hard to explain process. But it was something that is a good learning experience. And of course, other stuff. I don't want to bore you with those details, but this basically reflected the work that I was doing and what I was learning on the side. And my team and my management saw that. So very quickly, my other team members saw what I was doing. I was going for my certification. So I got certified for my CCNA, and that was a big deal. They saw that I was studying a lot. I was closing tickets. I mean, like closing tickets with configuration and support. And they came to me and said, what are you doing that we can learn from? And what happened was that I told them that, well, I got this book here, and that's what I did. I did these labs, and I'm happy to even have a training class with some of you guys. Let's see what happens. And that's where me teaching people actually started. It happened at Cisco. So a couple of days a week, there were a lot of people during our lunch break, and I would teach people how to configure frame relay interfaces, routers, password recoveries. I was teaching them all of this great stuff because they were still learning about IP subnetting. George was still teaching that, and they wanted to do much more than that. So I started teaching these guys how to do networking, Cisco networking, during my free time, during lunch. I thought it was fun, so I did it all the time. And I gave them the resources for what they can do. And they started to do that. Some of them actually went out and they actually bought this book because I recommended that. So that was kind of cool. And that's where things start to change at Cisco, of me getting a little bit of pushback. So management, my managers, my manager and supervisors, they saw that I was learning. I was moving pretty fast. And they told me, you gotta slow down. And that was a little weird for me because I'm doing this on my own free time. And they're telling me to slow down. They also did not like the fact, if you noticed, this is not a Cisco Press book. They had a little bit of a concern with that. I'm serious. So that was a little strange for me. Whether it's Cisco Press or this book, they're all teaching the same thing. So it was a little strange why Cisco would be concerned on the books that I'm buying to learn about networking. But they wanted me to slow down. The other thing that I quickly learned was that Cisco wanted you to embrace the Cisco culture. Just kind of follow the process of how things work. So for me, I was like doing things on, pretty much on my own time. I was closing tickets. That wasn't how Cisco worked. Everything has a process. And I convinced them, I told them, well, I'm confused here. Cisco's priorities with the customer. I'm taking care of the customer. My surveys reflect that. They are getting frontline support, and you're gaining a very strong network engineer in the future. And they said, oh, absolutely, though. We love the feedback that you're getting. You're doing a great job, but we need to slow down and just kind of follow. Cisco has a process. It has a structure, though. We just want you to follow that structure and not get out of line. So those were like a little bit of red flags that I started to learn from Cisco over the months when I was there. Well, over the many months, I made a lot of great friends, which makes sense. I was mentoring a lot of them. I was teaching them in these classes that I'm talking about. And when they're on the phone working on issues, a lot of them want me to be on the phone and kind of help them, them gaining the experience that they want. I loved all of that. But all of us over time, we saw some of the pressure from Cisco that I'm talking about slowing down. You got to stay in line. That's kind of really the overall theme that we got from Cisco. Kind of like walking on eggshells. Well, one of these people that I was friends with, his name was Jerry. He's a great guy, but he really did not like the pressure and what Cisco was kind of giving us about, slowing down, staying in line. So he had a job offer at an ISP, and he got it. And he gave his 2-week notice, the proper thing to do. Well, the next day was a meeting in the morning, a staff meeting. And my manager comes into to the room and he tells my friend Jerry, quickly come out and talk for a few seconds. So they both leave. My manager comes back 5 minutes later, but my friend Jerry does not. So the manager goes in front of all of us and he says, I have an announcement to make. And the announcement is Jerry had a job offer. He gave his 2-week notice, but I told him that was not necessary. If you do not believe in what Cisco is doing, then you should leave. And that's basically how I feel. If you don't believe in what Cisco is doing, we all looked at each other very confused of where is this coming from? It made us really concerned that if we don't follow in line, we could be fired. We were actually concerned about this. We were having a little chit chats about this. But for me, that was the beginning of the end. So later that particular day, I called my friend Jerry. I said, what happened? Let me hear your side of it. And it was basically the same thing. And I told him, I can't work here anymore. That environment is not what I want to do. Again, I'm feeling the pressure. They want me to slow down. I'm not progressing any further in the company. And I need a change. I said, it's scary because Cisco is a very big company. Leaving Cisco doesn't make any sense. But I don't like this environment. I don't like to be held back. So he said, well, you know what? Let me go and talk to some people though. And he went ahead and called me back a few days later and said, I told them about you, that you're CCNA certified. And yes, they want to schedule a phone interview. I did a phone interview when I was there at Cisco, like in the conference room. And within a week, I got the job offer. They wanted me there at the ISP. So this was very tricky for me. If I go to my manager and if I tell them that, I got a job offer, here's my 2-week notice, he was going to do the same thing that he did to Jerry. So I told everybody what I was going to do. They said, are you sure you want to do this? Cisco is a pretty big company. They are doing some pretty big things. They're a great company. Are you sure you want to do this? You are a great network engineer. You have progressed a lot. This could be a bad decision. If you think it's best, then you should do it. So I was really concerned. I was kind of hesitant, but I had to do it. In my heart, I had to do it. So I went to my manager and I told him, hi, I hate to say this. There's no great way to say it. I say thank you for everything I've learned here, the opportunities I've learned here. You guys are great, but I'm quitting. And I'm just going to leave it at that. They were trying to fish. They were trying to get more information out, but no, I just quit and I left. And my brain was trying to figure out, what do I do now? Is this really a good thing? What do I do now? So what's the bottom line? What did I learn when I was working at Cisco, and what I want you guys to take away from the story that I told you guys? I learned that when you work for a particular company, an IT company, like Cisco or Juniper or Palo Alto Networks or SonicWall, Microsoft, you're learning about their products and you are only focused on those products and you're recommending only those products. As a network engineer, this is important. It's important to learn how to build, design, and configure a network as a solution, not as a Cisco solution. When I talk to sales engineers, when I see them giving presentations, they always say, oh yes, you need this Cisco router, this Cisco switch, this Cisco firewall, this Cisco load balancer. What's more important is not what the product is. What are the requirements? What is the requirements for the solution of what the customer is looking for? Redundancy, security. You need to understand those requirements. Those are things that I talked about in the network design video that I talked about the technical objectives. That's what's more important, is defining the requirements that will build the solution. Then you can determine what are the different pieces of that. Okay? Because yes, Cisco routers, Cisco switches are great. I recommend that to customers all the time, and most network engineers would do the same thing. But for firewalls, oh, there's a lot of great contenders out there, right? There's FortiGate out there. There is the Palo Alto Networks firewall. And yes, the Cisco ASA is also a great firewall. But the point is there are a lot of good players in that market. What about load balancing? That's F5 Big IP or even Citrix. That's what's used for load balancing, not Cisco ACE or Cisco CSS as it was a long time ago. Or what about WAN optimization? Riverbed is the leader. In our video series, I showed a particular chart that shows that Riverbed is the leader and Cisco is not. So again, you're looking at particular solution as a network solution, not as a Cisco solution or a Microsoft solution. And that is something that I have learned. Don't limit your options on just Cisco. Networks consist of different components now. And that's really what it is.